And I've just finished putting up a small 2 by 4 foot piece of plastic and hanging it between two trees, and climbing back into my sleeping bag, and just in time, because a star-filled night, which had just been absolutely beautiful, I had suddenly turned into a raging, howling wind, driving rain, and plenty of cold air. And so the question is, what's a wimp like me, whose only idea of roughing it was years ago taking a tour of the national parks in a very comfortable Winnebago, what's somebody like me doing in a nor'easter in northern Canada? And let me explain. Several years ago, a student I got to know pretty well because he had taken both of my classes, the public speaking and the speech writing class, asked me to tell my story, to speak my truth. Since this was the first time anybody had asked me to do this, I said, let me think about this, okay? But I really couldn't say no, because this speech is all about saying yes. Saying yes when you'd rather say no. Saying yes when it forces you to face your fears. And saying yes when it means being vulnerable, as you saw tonight, peeling away your protective layers to bare your soul and speak your truth. I'll share with you 3 yeses that got me out into that wilderness on that cold night years ago, and that got us into this classroom tonight, or this auditorium. The first yes came about 30 years ago, before virtually all of you were born. I'd recently become communications director of my company, and the president was extended an invitation to give a prestigious lecture to a business school in New York City. Since speeches were a rarity for our Swiss company, we did not have a speechwriter on staff, and the few speeches that had been given in the past had been prepared by an outside consultant. When I went to this individual, and he told me that he'd be glad to do it for $3,500, I said, whoa, that's outlandish. Besides, the speech was about the chemical industry, our industry, and I thought this would be a great learning experience for me. So I said yes. I decided to write that speech. With a book on how to write a speech in one hand and mounds of chemical data over here, chemical industry data over here, I began my first speech, and it took me 6 weeks to write this 25 or 30-minute speech. It was far from perfect, but it got a lot of media coverage for the president and the company, which led to more speaking engagements for him and more speech writing opportunities for me. What started out as a collateral duty and a challenge became a full-time profession when I lost my job. Well, speak the truth, when I got fired from my job. And I started working for myself. More important, it would eventually lead to a teaching position at Wharton and ultimately the one here at Phelps. Say yes to a challenge and it will open doors you don't even know are there. A second significant yes occurred 10 years ago, right about now. The woman who had become my wife asked if I wanted to accompany her on a retreat to Lake Tomatomie in northern Ontario, Canada. My immediate response was no. Going out in the wilderness, sitting around a fire, unlike Ben, who likes that kind of thing, that's not my thing, especially when it involves sweat lodges. And that's her thing, as I told her, not mine. But being the gracious person that she is, she accepted that answer. But several months later, as the final deadline for signing up for that retreat came up, she asked me again, would I like to go? This time, instead of an outright no, I did something different, something surprising for me. I asked her if she wanted me to go. When she said yes, I could say yes. And that yes has made all the difference. For on that retreat and in that community of friends I found there, I found my life work and confirmed my life partner. To give you some idea of how profound that experience was, let me read a couple of entrees. Got food on my mind. From a journal I kept. just like my friend Marissa here. The first entry is from the morning after the sweat lodge, when we were sharing our experiences in a circle around the fire. Before I read it, let me explain how many people know what a sweat lodge is? That's pretty good, pretty good. Okay, but for the rest of you, let me just sort of give you a non-engineering student's diagram of a sweat lodge. It's an igloo-shaped material. It's got a wooden frame, and the wooden frame is covered by either a canvas, a heavy-duty canvas, or some blankets. There's a little opening here that's got a flap over it, and what happens is if you look down on this thing from above, there's a pit in the middle, and what happens is the firekeeper outside has been roasting rocks, literally baking rocks inside in a fire outside the sweat lodge for hours and hours and hours, so that they are red. They're these big rocks that are bright red. And during the different stages, different periods of the sweat lodge, they'll open this up and he'll shovel in some rocks. They go in the center right here, and we are the people all around here. And there's usually about, the sweat lodges that I've been in, there are about 15 people crowded around this very intense fire. So that's a sweat lodge. What happens is there's a leader inside here. He's the one that gets them into the pit inside, and the rocks make it extremely hot. But occasionally they'll ladle water on top, creating steam, and the steam makes it almost unbearable, which is why they call this a purification ritual in Native American, for the Native Americans, and it's been used for hundreds and hundreds of years. And here's what I wrote in my journal after that experience. There's joy in community, in relating and listening to others, in being humble. I let myself drop away so that I can let them in. But I start to get angry, hearing how much they benefited from the sweat lodge experience. I'm envious and resentful. This is old stuff that I hate, and I remain quiet until the end. And then I close my eyes and just let go. I tell them what happened and how I felt. In thanking others, I was emptied. I was loved and I gave love. My heart was indeed speaking, not my head. When I finished, Arlene, a woman dying of cancer, hugged me and we both cried. The journal goes on. Fire melts anger. Love came to me as I listened. I was quiet, not trying to impress with my mouth. That's the secret. I thought my gift was words. It might be being quiet and being able to listen. The second entry is from the final day of the retreat, when we shared what we learned and the commitments we were going to make going back into the real world. My commitment was this: to spread my love of the spoken word around the world and not let anyone or anything get in my way. You can tell I was a little high from the experience at that point, but despite the hyperbole, this is pretty much what I've been doing and loving doing ever since. And all I had to say was yes. The third yes came barely 2 years later while attending yet another retreat with my wife. On the last day, I committed to go on a vision quest, which was going to be held back on Lake Temagami in Canada. Now, if I was reluctant to go to Canada the first time, on what turned out to be a very tame, very healing experience, I really didn't want to do a vision quest. A vision quest is a retreat on steroids. It's outward bound for the soul. A vision quest is a tradition that goes back thousands of years, and it's frequently part of an initiation or rite of passage. Indigenous people go on them when they seek guidance or they face a crisis. And they involve going out into the wilderness alone, usually to a sacred place, and usually without food and water, to sit quietly and listen to what the spirit world has to say to them. I knew about this particular vision quest because my wife had done it 6 months after her late husband had died of prostate cancer. And she says she wanted to put herself out on a limb to see if she could do it, but also to seek help with her grief and in the spiritual setting and the community of friends she knew she would find there. The vision quest, according to her, included challenges like rope courses, which involve walking a rope 30 feet, strung up 30 feet from the ground between trees, more sweat lodges, and ended in spending 2 nights alone in the woods without food or water. Not my cup of tea at all. But I said yes, because I trusted her, and I'd seen and felt firsthand what saying yes can do. But that didn't make the challenge any easier. In fact, at dinner the night before I left for Canada, I confessed that I really didn't look forward to the trip. I feared heights. I hated sweat lodges. And I didn't at all like the idea of being out in the woods for 2 nights by myself. The only thing I looked forward to was the float plane that carried us from the mainland out to the island where the campsite was. Now that was fun. But I said yes, and I'll never regret it. We didn't have to do the ropes course. It had become pretty shaky over the years. And we have a lot of overweight people in our group, thanks to America's addiction to fast food and soft drinks. But we did have our share of challenges. 2 sweat lodges, a harrowing canoe trip across a wind-tossed lake, the nor'easter I referred to earlier, and a snake that happened to live where I wanted to spend my time on the land. As I've said, I don't like heights, but I really don't like snakes. When I found one under a rock that I had just picked up as I was getting ready to prepare the circle I was to be sitting in for the next 40 hours, my first thought was to put the rock right back down and get the hell out of it. But then I realized the snake was there for a reason. It was a test. So I decided to stay put and simply find another rock to put in my circle. And I made a silent compact with the snake. You don't bother me, I won't bother you. Which seemed to work because I didn't see him again. But before long, the snake was forgotten because the storm came up and I hunkered down in my sleeping bag wearing every piece of clothing I had with me. It was during that first wild night that I got the message that's governed my teaching and my life ever since. Speak the truth and help others do the same. I went on to have many dreams and images and messages in my time alone, those 40 hours out alone. But this is the one that I came to Temagami to get. This is the one I was meant to share with you. The Vision Quest was my rite of passage, my initiation. I went from just teaching public speaking to tapping into something much bigger, much more powerful, by encouraging people like you to share your truth, to tell your story. I'm helping you connect with others, as you saw tonight and last week, on a much deeper level. Just think about the speeches that you've given or heard. They're powerful. Steve Jobs said that you cannot connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking back. Saying yes has connected my dots. Saying yes to that first speech gave me the experience and the tools that I needed to survive losing my job and thrive teaching public speaking. It also sparked my love of the spoken word. Saying yes to that first retreat, when it was much easier and much more natural to say no, gave me the mission to spread that love of the spoken word around the world. And I don't have to go very far. A good part of the world is represented right here in this university. Saying yes to that Vision Quest gave me the message that I pass on to you. Continue to speak your truth. Risk being vulnerable, as you saw people do tonight. As future leaders, encourage everyone you come into contact with to do the same. You've seen what it can do. Can you imagine if more people did it, started speaking that way? So keep saying yes. Keep facing your fears. Keep accepting your challenges. I know you will. Yes is a gift that keeps on giving.